like the whole singularity idea, right? That technology is going to get to the point where it's just self-improving and it's just going to go vertical from there. Again, I've always been very skeptical of that. I'm always like, yeah, I mean, sure, maybe, but it's going to take forever. And, maybe in 100 years or 1,000 years, you see something like that. But then you get an advance in AI like this that is just so incredible. And then you start thinking to yourself, okay, well, maybe this isn't so far-fetched, right? I'm personally seeing the sort of exponential factor using the AI stuff for programming and just how much of a boost that gives you. All of a sudden, you could be like 2, 3, 5, 10 times more productive.
Welcome to the Leaders in Tech podcast. I am your host, David Mancella. This podcast is dedicated to interview people that are living life in their own terms, specifically by leading other people in technology, starting with their own lives. And today we have with us a great leader, one of my best friends too. We started our businesses very, very close together, and his life is one of freedom and one of a beautiful example that you can really lead your life to a path of fulfillment. So, Jason Hanley, brother, welcome to the show.
Well, what a nice introduction. Appreciate that.
Jason,
I certainly try.
Thanks. Jason, for the audience, can you give me your full name again? Because my English is not very good looking. And where do you live? And what do you do for a living?
My name's Jason Hanley, and currently live in Hope, BC, Canada. And what do I do for a living? Lots of things. Mostly consulting right now. So technology consulting, and I'm currently the CTO for a startup in the virtual reality sector.
It seems to be, virtual reality seems to be taking on a lot of momentum, right?
Yeah, I mean, it gets momentum and then it slows down, and then it gets momentum and slows down. But I think it's poised for some incredible growth.
For sure. Like, it's funny because I remember when when Facebook came up with their metaverse and virtual reality, everybody was talking about that. And then blockchain came up, everybody started talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And now ChatGPT came up and everybody's talking about AI, right?
Yeah, well, don't forget about Web3. That was kind of like the cryptocurrency and NFT kind of fad as well. So yeah, there've been a couple like big tech fads that have exploded like that, and metaverse was definitely one of them. But I think the metaverse is kind of separate from virtual reality. There was virtual reality before there was this talk of the metaverse. And I think the metaverse kind of got blown way out of proportion. But the core like virtual reality stuff is still there. And especially augmented reality, AR. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of going to be the biggest thing in the next few years, especially with Apple's device supposedly coming out quite soon.
So can you tell for the audience, can you explain what augmented reality is?
Yeah, I mean, virtual reality means you're completely 100% immersed in a different reality. So you put on the headset and that's all you see, this like virtual world. Whereas augmented reality, you put on a headset and you can still see actual things around you, right? So for instance, I have a Meta Quest. It's actually a Quest 2. So it has cameras on the front. So if I put that on and then enable the pass-through mode, then I can still see everything in my office. And then it overlays the interface on top of that. So that's augmented reality.
Yeah, I remember that when augmented reality came out, one of my clients asked us to build something for a mobile device, and it was for billboards. So basically, they had a contract with the government to have augmented reality on all the billboards for public places. So you will go with your phone and you will display your camera at the phone, and it will actually pop up something that will get you to a site just based on
Yeah.
a pamphlet on a billboard. And that was amazing. And that was a few years ago already, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, sort of simple AR, I call it. You can do on phones, and that's of course, like the Pokemon games and that kind of thing. I mean, when we were in Mexico, they even had this place that had virtual reality art. So it's regular artwork that you can hang anywhere, but of course it comes with an app, and you hold the app up to that artwork, it recognizes it, and then it overlays a whole animation with music, and the picture just sort of comes to life. So yeah, lots of interesting applications for that.
That's incredible. So in your current startup, what is it focused on? If you can disclose that information.
Yeah, of course. No, it's e-learning in virtual reality. And our first courses are about music production, which is kind of right up my alley because I do music production myself.
So how will you use virtual reality with e-learning?
So it makes it a lot more interactive. So for instance, one of our first courses involves mixing music, and that requires you to have a mixing device of some sort. And a lot of the professional ones used in studios are really big and really expensive. I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars for these types of units. So you can go into virtual reality and use a virtual one and play with it, and it costs you just the cost of the course.
Wow. So availability to hardware that has been emulated with software, plus the intense attention span through the device and the virtual world, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it walks you through, so you can see the mixer board in front of you, and stuff pops up and shows you, okay, turn this knob, and then a little red thing on the knob, so turn it exactly to this point, and then we check, did you turn it to that point?
That is so cool.
Yeah, very, very immersive learning.
That is amazing. All right, let's look back in time to see how you became the person you are now. High school, your last year of high school. What was in your mind, and what did you decide to do after you graduated?
Oh, my last year of high school. That's kind of funny, actually, because I'd already decided what I was going to do. I mean, even before high school.
Really?
So I kind of planned my path pretty early on. I want to say even by the end of grade 6, grade 7, I knew that I wanted to go into programming and learn computer science. And I was lucky enough to be very, very close to one of the best computer science universities in the world, University of Waterloo.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, this just makes sense. So all through high school, I took all of the courses and focused on things that I knew would be required to get me into the computer science program at Waterloo. So by my last year of high school, I was actually pretty well set up. I think I was actually working 30 hours a week at a print shop, as well as going to school full time. I think I had like one or two spares, maybe.
That's crazy. So that was almost a full-time job while going to school. Why did you do that?
Well, my family didn't have like a whole lot of money, and I didn't want to take out massive loans to go to university. So, you need money. It didn't cost nearly as much as it does now, but it was still a significant expense. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to earn as much money as possible so I could pay as much of the school as I could.
That's amazing to have a passion like that from such a young age. You know how blessed you are? Number one, to know what you like in life, and also to have the enough passion and discipline to go after it, even though the odds are against you. Like for university, to get accepted alone, what's the average now? It's like 90%. You're like, how much do you need to have in your marks to get accepted? It's insane, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I knew all of my math courses had to have very high marks. So I focused, all of my focus in school was on the math courses and my computer science course, a little bit to the detriment of some of the other courses, right? But you're right, I didn't realize how fortunate I was back then to actually know what I wanted to do and have that goal. Because I could focus all of my attention on that. It made it much easier.
That's amazing. And so of course you got accepted.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I was just in another interview with another leader in technology, a senior vice president for a large pest control company in the States. And he's into music too. And we made the analogy that computer science is very closely related to art, especially to music. And people
100%.
never get that, people don't know that link, right?
Math and music are very, very closely related.
Incredible, right?
Yeah.
So, computer science, you kept working or you had to lay off some of your work hours?
Well, again, very interesting. This was a little bit of a mistake. During my first year of university, I continued on with part-time work at the print shop. But that ended up to be a little bit too much. The high school classes, they were relatively easy for me. But first year computer science at Waterloo was much harder than I thought it would be. Especially the math classes just kicked my butt. So I realized very quickly that it wasn't going to work for me to keep that job. As much as I really liked that job. Also, I got accepted to the co-op program. So for those that don't know that means that you take 2 semesters of school and then 1 semester of working full-time for 4 months. So that kind of helped with the money problem as well, because that was actually like a paid internship for those 4 months.
That's amazing. And so for the audience, university in Canada is probably 25% of the cost of university in the States. And even like that, people end up with a big loan at the end, right?
Well, and even now in Canada, I want to say it costs, more than double what it did when I was in school. I don't even know what it costs now, actually.
It's crazy. My daughter graduated from English at U of T 3 years ago, and her student loans are not, it's not easy to pay them back,
Yeah, what is tuition now for University of Waterloo? $700 plus 4 months work term. Yeah, it's definitely more than double.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So that was another thing that I was just hugely fortunate that I was actually, with my co-op money and being very frugal, I was able to graduate with almost no debt.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you stay at home or you went out and did the whole college experience?
I stayed at home for the first term, for the first year. And then after that, I lived not on campus, but I rented a place in Waterloo. And the thing is, I was moving around every 4 months. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it kind of made sense just to rent a place. And then wherever I was working, that was usually somewhere different. So, it was a pretty crazy time.
I can imagine. What was your first co-op job?
My first co-op job was actually in Ottawa I'm sure you remember Corel.
Wow.
Other people might not have ever even heard of it, but it was a massive Canadian technology company, a huge success. And their flagship program was Corel Draw, which I had used for years prior, doing desktop publishing and working in the print shop, doing my own desktop publishing, freelance. So that was massively exciting for me to actually go to Corel, this big popular company, and work on their flagship product.
That's incredible. So you were coding already on co-op?
Oh yeah.
Really? They gave you that responsibility. That's amazing.
Oh, of course. Yeah. All of the co-op programmers from Waterloo, they were expected to do that. Yeah, right off the bat.
That's amazing. I imagine that you were well paid then. I mean, for being
Yeah,
a
I mean,
right?
yeah, obviously not as much as like a full-time programmer, that they would hire who had already graduated. But for a university student, oh yeah, we were paid very well.
Yeah, I do remember in the 80s and early 2000s, Adobe Photoshop was nothing compared to CorelDRAW. It had the market. They were the market leaders.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, Adobe, I was going to say Photoshop, I think, was still the market leader in raster image generation, but vector images, Adobe had Illustrator, and it hadn't quite picked up yet. CorelDRAW was definitely the number one package for years and years.
Incredible. Wow. So, moving fast forward, what was your first job? Like, what did you do after graduating university?
So my first job after graduating was in Atlanta for a company called Erdos, which I want to say like the day after I started was then acquired by a larger company called Leica Geosystems. And yeah, it was programming for something called remote sensing and photogrammetry, which is basically just processing of satellite images. So that was a very, very interesting job.
Did you have to move to Atlanta or you could do it remotely?
Yeah, I moved to Atlanta.
You moved to Atlanta. How was that experience?
I lived there for, oh, great. Yeah, I lived there for 2 years. Atlanta's a really nice city.
That's amazing. So I guess your whole life, so for the audience, I know Jason. Jason travels the world like no one else I know. And I want to think that I travel a little bit, but not as much as Jason does. And you're literally a citizen of the world. But I didn't know that it was because you're upgrading. Like even since co-op, you had to move to Ottawa, going back. So I guess you were taught by life to be flexible with that, right?
Yeah, I guess so. The moving to Ottawa, that wasn't very far, right? I mean, I could drive that in 5 hours from home. Right. But I think what gave me a taste for travel and discovering new places was my internship at Microsoft, which I want to say was in my second or third year university. Anyways, yeah, so I had never really been anywhere too far. And that was my first experience with being in a place where there was like mountains and ocean and just completely different geography from where I kind of grown up and what I was used to. So I think that was really my first taste of being somewhere unique and just kind of opened my eyes to, wow, there's places in the world that are really different.
I guess Bill Gates was still the CEO, right? When you got fired?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that was back when they were still getting sued by the US government for being a monopoly.
Right. I remember that. That's when they rescue Apple, right? Remember?
Yeah. I had almost forgotten about that. Yeah. How things change over time, especially with technology, right? Things change so quickly and so drastically.
Right. And this talks about the leadership in technology, actually. If you look at Apple the way it is now and Microsoft the way it is now, is their leadership. Great leaders. Like, you would think that one company had to die for the other company to grow, like Corel and Adobe. But in this case, they both prosper. Like, if you look at these two companies, they are huge and they are in the market and they coexist, right?
Yeah, I would say, between Apple and Microsoft, there's not like a whole lot of animosity or competition. But I think if you look at like Microsoft and Google, they're in like very heavy competition. They have kind of a bit of a history as well. So,
what's interesting for me is that how we actually evolved from the internet, just remove the operating system competition, I guess. Even the hardware competition is still there, but with the internet, I find that everything got normalized on web browsers and the competition is actually there, right? On the cloud.
It made it a very different world. Yeah, the operating system wasn't nearly as important. once we started to see web apps, which was, I don't know, like mid 2000s, I guess, towards the end of the 2000s, web apps kind of really took off. And you're right. After that, didn't matter what kind of computer you had. You could use the same web app.
Mm-hmm. It is beautiful. Like you and I were so blessed to be born in a place in the world, in history, where we could actually see computer science really emerging and skyrocketing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Incredible that, we started writing languages that were so primitive compared to what we have now, and without the internet. And now look at us now. You are the CTO for a company that is doing virtual reality for e-learning. Like foreign concepts 20 years ago, right?
It is interesting to think back. Yeah, because I can remember when I was learning C++, I had this massively thick book, which was, the reference for C++ and, all the libraries and everything. And you'd actually have to look up functions in the index on the back and read, like, you had books on your desk beside you. You couldn't just automatically look something up. That was the next phase. And you could just look anything up on the internet, right? And you could look up not only just functions and things, but how to do stuff and almost like copy paste some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, the next massive leap is AI. Now you don't even really need to know the coding or the syntax. You can more or less just ask a chatbot to write you a program that does something, describe it in English, and boom, it writes you the code. So look at how that's evolved, right? Just in my lifetime, from having to have this physical book and read and how slow that was to I'm just going to tell the computer what I want and it's going to make it for me.
I remember actually last year throwing away my Delphi books on C++ and the object Pascal. And they're like, I had like a library with books this big, for those compilers. Incredible, right? Do you remember when IntelliSense came up with compilers? When object-oriented programming really took off, and I think it was I think it was Delphi. It was Borland that brought up IntelliSense, where you put a dot and it will show you all the method, all the classes. Like you could actually look down on a pull-down list and say, that saved me like half an hour of going to a book, right?
I know, yeah, that was a huge thing too.
Oh my God! And by the way, we're not that old.
Yeah, and now it's like you don't even think about the time where that didn't exist.
Incredible.
It'll be the same with AI soon.
I run a software company. You know that, right? I have 60 people doing engineering work for other businesses, writing products online, mostly on the cloud and mobile devices. And I was just in a conference, Abundance 360 by Peter Diamandis, and he said that he's very good for predicting future in technology. And he mentioned that 5 years from now, because of the scale of advancement in AI and computer science, software developers will be obsolete. Can you believe?
That very well could be. I wouldn't necessarily use the word obsolete. I would say that we're going to have to be a very different type of developer.
Yeah.
It'll require a different skill set. Just as the skill set for building software has evolved over the years, right? Like it's been a long time now that very few people have to write, very low level software, for at the hardware level.
Like writing drivers and stuff like that, right? I remember that.
Yeah. Whereas that used to be a massive market. And now those people still exist and that market still exists, right? There's still DSPs and small hardware. I mean, our friend Matt, he does low-level systems programming because he builds little robots that fight each other. So I mean, that's just a hobby, obviously, but that code still needs to be written. But the market for programmers has shifted such that there's a much bigger market for higher level programming. So yeah, instead of saying that job will become obsolete, I think it's just going to move ever and ever higher level.
Yeah.
Right? That, a programmer is more or less going to be, I don't know, what they're sort of calling like a prompt engineer. That term has kind of started popping up.
Yeah.
Someone who's really good at talking to an AI and getting it to give you the output that you want. So, and honestly, at the beginning of programming, even back in like the 60s and 70s, I think there were visionaries that said, eventually we're not going to have to speak the computer's language. Eventually computers will speak our language.
Yeah.
And, a year ago, if you would have asked me, when, how soon until we can just start talking to our computers and like, programming, just telling it what you want it to do in English, I would have said, oh, that's still years away, right? I'm like, they've been working on that and it's been terrible. It doesn't work at all. But man, as soon as some of the new stuff came out, like ChatGPT, when that hit, all of a sudden everyone was like, oh, this is something different. This is something better. This is something that we couldn't have imagined would have been coming this soon.
Like the thing is that we are I think we're still under Moore's law, that it says that technology doubles every 18 months, right? Or it gets cheaper. And that's exponential. So if you know how the law of exponentiality works, actually Einstein called it one of the biggest, amazing laws in the world. But at the beginning, it is not moving, right? So if you look at the first 10 years, it's like nothing. But when that thing starts to exponentiate, it goes like a hockey stick. Right?
And the trouble is that humans are terrible at envisioning exponential growth and figuring it out. Just like I said, right? I mean, I have a math degree. I understand exponential growth very, very well. And yet I still can't apply it to things like that. Like the whole singularity idea, right? That technology is going to get to the point where it's just self-improving and it's just going to go vertical from there. Again, I've always been very skeptical of that. I'm always like, yeah, I mean, sure, maybe, but it's going to take forever. And, maybe in 100 years or 1,000 years, you see something like that. But then you get an advance in AI like this that is just so incredible. And then you start thinking to yourself, okay, well, maybe this isn't so far-fetched, right? I'm personally seeing the sort of exponential factor using the AI stuff for programming and just how much of a boost that gives you. All of a sudden, you could be like 2, 3, 5, 10 times more productive.
Yeah.
Just because of this new tool. So then you're 10 times more productive to make more tools that are going to make you more productive and it just gets in this cycle.
Snowball, right? And we're so blessed that we've actually started writing AI programs ever since the neural networks came out with the big cloud providers. So we're actually last year we built an artificial intelligence infused software to predict shipping containers from China to the US for our clients of ours because they were going crazy with cost, and it works great. So we actually know about AI, but this, like you said, this thing is another level. I monitor it very closely. OpenAI was not a big company, small company. And now they got Microsoft in the back. I think they started with $1 billion and they want to give them like $10 billion or something. So now, billions of dollars being put. Microsoft just announced that the ChatGPT API is available on the Azure network. So for us, it's like, yes, because we have a core product and then now we can actually connect to that and just grab the whole thing and make it available to our clients, right?
Yeah. I've been using the ChatGPT API, not the one on Azure, but just the one on OpenAI, and it's really incredible the kind of stuff you can do with it.
You know, when one of my engineers showed me how, it asked ChatGPT to make an HTTP request, the thing actually did it in front of my eyes. But then somebody else asked it to write a ping pong game on Python, and it actually did it.
Yeah.
In front of my eyes. I'm like, like this is assignments for computer science 101 that kids had to actually go learn for weeks.
And I think that's what I mean by, programmer in the future is going to have a different skill set. Right? Because, okay, it's cool that you can just ask an AI to like build a program for you. But then at this stage, it can't really figure out bugs or maintain it. In some cases, it can figure out some bugs. Like it's pretty astounding. I was even working with it, and I've copy pasted some code that it generated and tried it, and I got an error. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to copy paste the error back into ChatGPT and see what it says.
No.
It understood, and it was like, oh, I'm sorry. Funny how it always apologizes. I mean, it's like it's Canadian or something. Oh, I'm sorry. Here's the fixed code. Put in the fixed code, bam, it works.
No way.
Like, it's unbelievable.
That's self-learning in your eyes.
Yeah.
So the thing, for me, and that's why I do believe in 5 years, because for me right now, where it stops is that there is no module integration. It doesn't know how to build an ERP system, for example, because you need a lot of modules integration. You need to build a library of objects and classes and all that. That only an engineer can do right now. But if it's writing simple code right now, and if it's exponential, how long would it take for that thing to tell it, write me an Excel system and a spreadsheet system that knows how to add, divide, multiply, and it will actually do it? Or write me a business intelligence system that tracks these metrics and give me charts, and it will actually do it.
Yeah, not only that, but the part that I was saying that it can't do right now, kind of like maintaining a large piece of software.
Yeah.
Eventually it's going to get there. They're already working on models that can take larger inputs, right? Like I think ChatGPT right now has a 4K token limit on the 3.5 version. I think 4 can do up to 8K tokens by default, but they've just released in alpha a 32K token model. Yeah. And I think someone was saying that you can put an entire research paper in it, like hundreds of pages long. You can put the whole research paper in it and tell it, summarize this research paper. Yeah, so those models are just, the input is just going to get bigger and bigger. So yeah, eventually you can definitely see the time where it could take an entire massive code base and refactor it, add a feature, fix bugs automatically.
Incredible. So for you, Jason, as a leader in technology, what do you think leadership should take on right now based on these new advancements? How do you become a good boss? How do you lead people, especially engineers that were hoping to write code the rest of their life? But what would you tell somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that I try to emphasize is don't be fearful of the technology, because that seems to be like the instantaneous response that most people have, right? The minute you say the word AI, people are like, it's gonna take people's jobs. I'm not gonna have a job. I'm afraid that I'm not gonna have a job, and that I'm not gonna make any money, and I'm not gonna be able to eat, right? Because that's just like the human instinct. So I think that's the number one thing I like to say, like, okay, don't be fearful, take a breath, think about what this technology is and what it does, and think not what it's going to take away from you, but what it's going to give to you, and how you can adapt. Because, hey, we're human beings. We're extremely adaptable, right? That's like our number one advantage. So how can you adapt to take advantage of this technology or any new technology? This is just a really good example. But yeah, as a leader, I think you have to just help people not be fearful and, take the time to think about how to integrate that technology into their life and into their work to make them more productive.
Beautiful. And so don't look at the negative side of things, look at the positive side and go with it, right? And grow.
Yeah. Be aware of the negatives, right? I mean, there are certain jobs that will definitely be eliminated. And in that case, adapting means find a different job, right? I mean, it's tough to say, and as a leader, if you have people who are in your employ, who you realize now are redundant, well, then you have to take that hard step of saying, hey, I'm sorry, but technology has become good enough that the job you're doing is no longer necessary. And then, but give them the support and suggestions like, hey, you're a very smart person. You have more skills beyond just doing this one simple thing that AI can now do, right? So why don't you look into learning about this and retraining to do that? Because again, another huge advantage with this new AI technology is you can learn about anything even easier than you could before. It was already really easy to learn things, right? Like, I mean, there's so much free learning out there. But now you can do it interactively, with an AI entity that can essentially be an expert in just about anything, minus the random mistakes that it makes here and there. Again, it's early days for this chat technology. We all know that every so often it just makes stuff up. So you've got to be a little bit careful. But for the most part, when you ask it about something, just about anything, it'll give you fairly decently accurate answers.
And you're completely right. I remember that by the end of the 1800s in the United States, 95% of the males were hired by farms. And remember the population back then. Now it's only 5% who are hired by farms because of the Industrial Revolution. And we're quadrupling in population, and everybody has a job. In fact, it's very hard to find somebody to work for you right now. So if that doesn't take away your fear, I don't know
quality of life.
Pardon?
Right? Think of the quality of life enhancements that we've had since then because of the technology.
Right.
Now, there's both good and bad, right? I mean, I don't know, working on a farm all day, it was really hard work, but, you're certainly in good shape. You didn't have to go to the gym.
Your job was the gym.
Yeah, you got all your exercise just by living, essentially.
Right.
So, there's pros and cons, but, I would argue that most people certainly live much more comfortable lives and have a lot more time to do the things that they want to do. And I think that will increase too, right? Boring, monotonous digital jobs are going to be taken over by.
And you're right. I think the 8 hours a work day that comes from the Industrial Revolution, I think that's going to become obsolete, right?
I mean, I hope so. I feel like it's very arbitrary, right? It's like you should work as long as necessary,
right?
But I don't really believe in the whole like hustle culture of having to just work all the time, 24/7, don't stop. You need to look a lot more at what you're accomplishing, right? And where you're putting that effort. Effort alone is not enough. right? You could put hundreds of thousands of hours of effort into something and it might amount to nothing. Or you could put a week's worth of effort into something and it could be massive.
Mhm.
Now, the trouble is you don't always know what effort is going to return on that investment and what isn't. But I think it's important to think about that, right? So yeah, arbitrarily working 8 hours a day is not necessarily the way to success.
Mhm. Amazing. That's such deep knowledge. Thank you so much, Jason. I do respect your time. I think we could be talking for another 2-3 hours, but
At least.
I think I might have to take you back in another episode for sure, because we're just reaching the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
Jason, if you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Oh, that's such a good question. This has nothing to do with technology. You know what I would write on it?
Mm-hmm.
The lyrics to that old song. Don't worry, be happy. And a big, huge smiley face.
Oh my God, it actually has a lot to do with technology. Thank you for that. Because I think it's an attitude, right? It's a way of living life. Life will always throw problems at us, heartaches, AI that is threatening your job. Right now we debunked that already, but people are thinking that. And if you don't have a positive attitude, if you don't realize that you can always adapt, is your human ability, your God-given ability as a human to adapt. And you're right.
Yeah.
We are here and we are not extinct because we know how to adapt, and we have given a beautiful brain that is conscious, right? And that is creating artificial brains now, right? So it's a way of living, and it's a way of choosing to be happy, right?
Oh yeah, a good attitude about something can overcome just about any obstacle.
Beautiful. Jason, thank you so much for your time, brother. If people would like to find out more about you or ask you more questions, where can they find you online?
I guess just my personal website, jasonhanley.com.
Fantastic. Jason, thank you so much. God bless and have a beautiful rest of the week. Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.